Well, hey, everybody. This is Robert, and welcome to Outbreak News TV. And on this episode, I'm going to look at the news story that's pretty big in the United States, Canada, parts of Europe. And that's the situation with this strain of H5, highly pathogenic avian influenza that's been spreading around, thanks in large part to wild birds. And of course, this week we've had some stories that come out of this outbreak where a U.S. Individual, it's been detected in him, and I think the CDC is going to treat this as an infection. But let's go ahead and take a look at what's going on right now in the United States. We'll touch on Europe briefly, and we'll look at some Q&A questions in this interesting paper in the journal Science concerning the resurgence of avian influenza. Okay, but let's go ahead and start with what's going on with the birds. And what we have here is this is the latest from the USDA. And right now, the highly pathogenic avian influenza, the H5s, have been reported in 30 states as of Friday. This includes the latest one, which was Vermont, that was reported yesterday. So 30 states, 251 confirmed flocks. Some are commercial flocks, of course. Some are backyard flocks. And you can see that right now, mostly the unaffected areas of the country are the southeast and the west primarily. So that's what's going on with that. And what we're seeing yesterday, or was it Thursday, was a report out of Colorado where they detected a case in a human. And let's go ahead and take a look at that report from Colorado. Let's see if I can find it quickly. Here we go. All right, good. State health officials investigate a detection of H5 influenza virus in a human in Colorado. And then what it says is Colorado health officials have been monitoring and testing people exposed to poultry and wild birds infected with avian flu, the highly pathogenic avian influenza, HPAI, also known as H5N1 flu. They say earlier this week, a test revealed the presence of influenza A H5 virus in a single nasal specimen from a person who was working on a farm with infected poultry. CDC confirmed the result on April 27th. Repeat testing on the person was negative for influenza. Because the person was in close contact with infected poultry, the virus may have been present in the person's nose without having caused infection. The patient is an adult male, younger than 40, largely asymptomatic, basically reported fatigue for about 3 days. He's now isolating and receiving Tamiflu per CDC guidance. Scientists believe that the risk to people is low as H5 influenza viruses spread among wild birds and poultry. They do not normally infect humans nor spread from person to person. There are currently no known cases of this H5 flu virus spreading among people, and no other confirmed cases in Colorado or the U.S. at this time. This positive result is due to direct exposure to infected poultry at a commercial farm in Montrose County. The person, who is an inmate at a state correctional facility in Delta County, was working with poultry as part of a pre-release employment program where participants have the opportunity to work for private employers and be paid a prevailing wage. The affected flock has been euthanized and disposed under the guidance of the USDA and Colorado Department of Agriculture. All members of the response team, including other inmate workers, were provided personal protective equipment while working on the farm. Okay, so that was kind of the big story that came out of Colorado uh, toward the end of the week. And following up on that pretty quickly was the CDC, who confirmed uh, this detection. Let's see what the CDC had to say on the same day. All right, make sure we got that. Okay, here we go. And they they don't say a whole lot different, but they do say the appropriate public health response at this time is to assume this is an infection and take actions to contain and treat. Now, this case does not change the human risk assessment for the general public, which CDC considers to be low. However, people who have job related or recreational exposures to infected birds are at a higher risk of infection and should take appropriate precautions outlined in the guidance. Of course, this is a couple of days before the USDA update, so CDC has been monitoring this. Outbreaks in the U.S. wild birds and poultry in late 2021 into 2022. H5N1 viruses have been found in U.S. commercial and backyard birds. They say 29 states. Of course, it's now 30, as we just saw, and wild birds in 34 states. So, roughly 2/3 of the country has seen this virus in wild birds. CDC has tracked the health of more than 2,500 people with exposure to H5N1 infected birds, and this is the only case to date. And other people involved in the culling operation in Colorado tested negative. This is the second human case associated with this specific group of H5 viruses that are currently predominant, and the first one in the US. The first one, of course, was um, early this year, late last year in the UK, and we'll look at that real quick. Um, as far as H5N1, there's been 880 human infections since the first cases were reported in 2003 worldwide. A lot of these cases are in Asia. We've seen them in Indonesia. We've also seen them in Egypt. So a lot of spread with this virus in humans um, over the past couple decades. However, the CDC does say the predominant H5N1 viruses that are circulating now among the birds are different than these earlier ones. And I just want to read this paragraph because it tells you a little bit about the birds and the virus. And the CDC says infected birds shed H5N1 viruses in their saliva, mucus, and feces. H5N1 virus infections among people are rare. However, human infections can happen when enough virus gets into a person's eyes, nose, or mouth, or is inhaled. People with close or close or lengthy unprotected contact, which means not wearing respiratory or eye protection, with infected birds or places that sick birds or their mucus, saliva, or feces have touched, may be at greater risk of the infection. Illnesses in people from bird flu viruses have ranged from mild to severe and have resulted in death. So that's just a little outline of um, how people can contract this H5N1 virus that's currently circulating. Okay, so I want to go ahead and go back to, like I said, the case in Colorado was the first one in the US, but the second one globally. And the first one we saw, I remember reporting on this back at the beginning of the year, I thought. Um, let's see if I got that up. Okay, good. And this is from the World Health Organization from January 14th of this year. And this says on January 6, 2022, the international health regulations focal point of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland notified the World Health Organization of the detection of a laboratory confirmed human case of avian influenza H5 from southwest England. The case lived with a large number of domestically kept birds, which had onset of illness on 18 December 2021, subsequently tested positive for uh, H5N1. So, so it has been seen before. Again, it is rare, but that was the first case. The Colorado case is the second case. All right, let me go ahead and jump over to the latest thing the CDC put out, and I think that was on Friday, and they put out a health alert network response. So let's take a look at what they had to say there. If there's anything different, anything we need to keep our eye on. Okay, there we go. Okay, so there we go. The H5N1 recommendations for human health and investigations. Let's see if anything is important to pull out of this. Well, we have a little history here, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. Ancestors of the highly pathogenic avian influenza H5N1 viruses first emerged in southern China and led to large poultry outbreaks in Hong Kong in 1997, which resulted in 18 human infections. These poultry outbreaks were controlled, but the viruses were not eradicated in birds, and the virus reassorted and reemerged in 2003 to spread widely in birds throughout Asia and later in Africa, Europe, and the Middle East, causing sporadic human infections. The H5 viruses were detected in North America from 2014 to 2016, where they caused widespread poultry outbreaks and detections among wild birds in Canada and the US. Since 2003, 19 countries have reported human infections, and the case fatality is pretty high on this. They have the numbers here as 864. We saw earlier that it's 880. Um, anyway, it's in the high 800s number of cases and 456 fatalities through March 1st, 2022. Let's see if there's anything else. At this time, the CDC considers the human health risk to the U.S. public from these newly identified H5N1 viruses to be low. All right, we've already kind of went over that, and they talk about what clinicians should do. So not a whole lot of different news in here, but it's cool to see some of this, a little bit of this history of the H5N1 viruses. All right, next thing I want to take a look at is what they're reporting in Europe. And let's take a look at that. I think they were hit with it first. And here we go. Make sure we can see it well. Okay. So this is from the European CDC, and this was published yesterday also. Avian influenza H5N1 viruses of clade 2.3.4.4b have been causing large outbreaks in Europe during the 2021-22 winter season and are continuously circulating among wild birds transmitting to poultry farms. In the autumn of 2021, these viruses were introduced to North America via wild birds and have since spread within Canada and the US. Okay, let's see if there's anything. Okay, so again, they talk about the one mild case that they had of H5N1 reported in the UK in 2021, as well as several transmission events in other mammal species such as fox, seals, minks, etc. And again, the ECDC, the European CDC, is basically saying the same thing. The risk of zoonotic influenza transmission to the general public in the EU countries is considered low. Of course, the risk for people in occupational groups like colors are at, of course, increased risk. All right. And the last thing I want to go over is this interesting paper in the journal Science. And they kind of address this stuff. This came out earlier this week also, and they talk about the resurgence, and they have it's kind of like an Q&A um, type of format. So let's see what they got to say in this, and we'll touch on some of the things in there. All right, this is from Science: The resurgence of avian influenza viruses. Highly pathogenic avian influenza viruses have recently been detected in the east coast of Canada and the United States, and have been found both in wild birds and poultry. This comes after the same strain swept through Asia, Africa, and Europe in late 2021, replacing the previous highly pathogenic avian influenza variant and causing widespread outbreaks and millions of deaths in poultry and wild birds. And of course, they say also it's not a major risk to human health. Um, and they go over a little bit of the history. I don't want to reiterate that. So let's look at some of the questions. How has the rapid spread of H5N1 occurred? It says, although highly pathogenic avian influenza variants often emerge in high density poultry production systems, it is wild birds that can spread these viruses globally. And the role of wild birds is spreading. Uh, the role before 2014 is unclear. However, late in 2014, wild waterfowl spread uh, avian influenza from their breeding areas in Siberia to Europe and North America and to Africa in 2017. And wild birds have now reintroduced avian influenza into North America with detections in wild birds, great black-backed gulls in St. John's, Canada. All right, so let's keep on going. What are the consequences of H5N1 spread? Although wild birds are able to spread these viruses through migration, the viruses may also cause their own mass mortality events. These mortality events in wild birds come with substantial conservation concern. For example, H5N1 caused the death of hundreds of red knots in the Netherlands in 2021, 10,000 migratory common cranes in Israel in December 2021. And it goes on and discusses some other ones, Dalmatian pelicans in Greece this year. Outbreaks of this virus have also had a substantial impact on poultry production and cost the sector billions of dollars since the reemergence. Um, let's see. In 2020, 2021 alone, there have been more than 3,000 events reported affecting approximately 15 million poultry losses that were either died from the virus or were culled due to the virus. All right, let's see. Onward transmission to humans is an ongoing threat. Okay, but they're not really saying anything different here. Oh, they do say that this is the cases and deaths, about the 60% case fatality that I talked about moments ago. This was the earlier classic strain that caused severe infections in more than half of those infected. But the strain we're dealing with now is different. The more recent strain has produced similar low rates of human infections, possibly because these viruses share the same ancestral GSGD lineage. However, different pathogenicity has been observed when human H5 infections do occur. And with the earlier H5N1 and H5N6 viruses appearing more severe and causing more deaths in humans than the H5N8 ones. All right, let's take a look at some more questions they have. What would raise the concern for H5N1 for humans? It says a recent European assessment determined that the risk of infection is low, and we've seen that with the CDC also. However, they say further adaptation would need to occur for this current virus to increase its ability to transmit between humans efficiently, a process that is only partially understood. Although this has not occurred yet, the persistence of H5Ns increases the likelihood. As with COVID, if this adaptation occurred and the virus became efficient at airborne transmission between humans, it would be virtually impossible to control. Okay, what has been done to curb the threat? Um, to gauge the risk, the international organizations like the World Health Organization and others all have programs to investigate avian influenza in humans, poultry, and wild birds. Further continued investment of surveillance of wild birds and poultry and of humans is critical to mitigate the potential pandemic threat. WHO continually prepares a stock of these viruses that are considered to be potentially dangerous to humans, which can be rapidly accessed for vaccine manufacture if required. Um, okay, so let's go on and see if they get any. And that's the bulk of the questions. But anyway, it's a very interesting article, and I'll link to it. It's definitely worth a read. Um, anyway, so that's what we got going on right now in the United States, and it's of course we've had this issue with wild birds and domestic birds for months now. But I think this case in Colorado is going to open up more people's eyes, and uh, we're definitely going to keep an eye on this, especially if we start seeing more human cases. Um, Also, we're going to take a look at how it's affecting states that have been not affected yet, the Southeast, the Far West, and some others. So anyway, um, hope you enjoyed this little report. This is something we've got to keep an eye on. I'm always covering this kind of information. Not only H5N1, but other ones, all these different strains that we're seeing in China, human infections, and elsewhere on the website, outbreaknewstoday.com. So I encourage you to check that out. Comment below, subscribe to the channel. Um, Let me know how we're doing. Like the video, share it with your friends, and I'll see you next time on Outbreak News TV.